The champagne flute slipped from Olivia's fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the penthouse she'd decorated with such care. But the sound was nothing compared to the voice drifting from the bedroom, her bedroom, moaning a name that wasn't hers. 5 years. 5 years of being the perfect wife to James Hartford, the charming architect everyone adored. 5 years of believing in the fairy tale of their Kensington love story, of dinner parties where friends envied their connection, of anniversary trips to the Cotswolds where he whispered promises against her skin. And now this. Through the half-open door, she could see them. James, with his shirt unbuttoned, his hands tangled in the auburn hair of Rebecca, her former best friend, the woman who'd been maid of honor at their wedding, who'd held Olivia's hand through 2 miscarriages and promised they'd get through it together. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself. It was in the laughter that followed, intimate and easy, as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. As if Olivia's entire existence had been nothing but a convenient facade for whatever this was. She should have screamed, should have stormed in, should have torn apart the life they'd so carefully constructed. Instead, Olivia backed away silently, her designer heels clicking softly against the hardwood as she retreated from her own home, her own marriage, her own carefully curated reality. She didn't cry. Not yet. The tears would come later, in waves that would nearly drown her. But in that moment, walking out into the cold London evening, Olivia Hartford made a decision that would change everything. She would never be anyone's second choice again. The morning had started like any other in the Hartford household, a masterclass in manufactured perfection. Olivia had woken at 6, her body trained by years of routine to rise before James needed her. She'd slipped from their king-sized bed with its Egyptian cotton sheets, careful not to disturb him, and padded barefoot across the heated floors to their state-of-the-art kitchen. The penthouse overlooked Hyde Park, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a London skyline that still took her breath away, even after 3 years of living there. She'd ground fresh coffee beans, the rich aroma filling their open-plan living space as weak autumn sunlight filtered through the glass. While the espresso machine hissed and gurgled, she'd arranged his breakfast, avocado toast with poached eggs, perfectly runny, the way he liked them, fresh orange juice, the Financial Times folded beside his plate. This was her life. This was what she'd chosen at 23, when James had proposed on a rooftop terrace in Mayfair, the ring glinting under string lights as he told her she was the only woman who'd ever truly understood him. "You're up early." James appeared in the doorway, his dark hair still tousled from sleep, wearing the silk robe she'd bought him for Christmas. At 35, he was undeniably handsome, sharp jawline, blue eyes that crinkled when he smiled, the kind of effortless charm that made clients and colleagues alike adore him. "Big presentation today, remember?" Olivia smiled, sliding his plate across the marble counter. "The Canary Wharf project. You've been working on it for months." "What would I do without you?" He kissed her forehead, the gesture so automatic it barely registered. "You take such good care of me." The words should have warmed her. Instead, they sat in her stomach like stones. It hadn't always been like this careful choreography of a marriage. In the beginning, there had been passion, late nights talking until dawn about their dreams. James had been a junior architect then, hungry and ambitious, and Olivia had just finished her degree in art history from University College London. She'd supported him through his early career struggles, had been there for every rejection and every triumph. She'd put her own career aspirations on hold, her plans to work as a curator, maybe at the Tate Modern or the Victoria and Albert Museum, because James's career required stability, required a wife who could host dinner parties for potential clients, who could make their home a showcase of his architectural aesthetic, who could be beautiful and gracious and utterly devoted. And she had been. God, she had been so devoted. "I'll probably be late tonight," James said between bites, not meeting her eyes. "The presentation might run long, and you know how Marcus is. He'll want to debrief afterward. Probably grab dinner somewhere." "Of course." Olivia nodded, already mentally planning her evening alone. Another night of waiting, of heating up leftovers, of falling asleep to the sound of BBC programming she didn't really watch. "I'll save you a plate." "You're incredible, Liv. Truly." He finished his coffee in 3 gulps, checked his Rolex, a gift from his father when he'd made senior partner, and headed toward the bedroom. "Oh, Rebecca might stop by this afternoon. She mentioned wanting to borrow that cookbook you bought in Paris." Rebecca, her best friend since university, the woman who'd introduced her to James at a gallery opening 7 years ago. "That's fine. I'll be here." Olivia's voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. By 8, James was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of his Tom Ford cologne and a coffee cup in the sink. Olivia stood at the window watching the morning traffic crawl along Knightsbridge and tried to remember when exactly she'd become this person, this hollow version of herself who existed only in relation to someone else's life. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Have you given any more thought to trying IVF again? You're not getting any younger, darling." Olivia deleted it without responding. The miscarriages had broken something in her marriage, though James would never admit it. The first one, 2 years ago, had been devastating but manageable. They'd grieved together, held each other through the loss. But the second one, 6 months later, had created a distance that felt impossible to bridge. James had thrown himself into work. Olivia had thrown herself into being the perfect wife, as if by excelling at everything else, she could somehow make up for her body's failures. The afternoon crawled by in a haze of household tasks. Olivia organized closets that didn't need organizing. She called the dry cleaner about James's suits. She confirmed their reservation at the Ledbury for Saturday night, their anniversary dinner that James had definitely forgotten about, but would pretend to remember when she reminded him. At 3, Rebecca arrived in a swirl of Chanel No. 5 and expensive cashmere. "Darling," she air-kissed Olivia's cheeks, her auburn hair falling in perfect waves around her angular face. Rebecca worked in fashion PR, always immaculately styled, always moving in circles, that made Olivia feel provincial, despite her own Kensington address. "You look tired. Are you sleeping?" "I'm fine." Olivia led her into the kitchen, pulling out the Paris cookbook from the shelf. "Here, though I'm not sure when you started cooking." Rebecca laughed, the sound like wind chimes. "I don't. But David, you know, the photographer I've been seeing, he's obsessed with French cuisine. I thought it might impress him." They made tea, falling into the familiar rhythm of female friendship, gossip about mutual acquaintances, complaints about London traffic, discussions of upcoming plans. But something felt off. Rebecca kept checking her phone, kept avoiding direct eye contact, kept steering the conversation away from anything substantial. "How's James?" Rebecca asked finally, her tone too casual. "He must be stressed with that big Canary Wharf pitch." "He'll be fine." "He always is." Olivia poured more tea, watching steam curl up from delicate porcelain. "He's having dinner with Marcus afterward." "Marcus?" Rebecca repeated the name carefully. "Right. Marcus." They parted an hour later, Rebecca kissing her cheek and promising they'd have lunch soon at that new restaurant in Notting Hill. Olivia watched her friend disappear into the lift and felt something cold settle in her chest. Something that whispered warnings she wasn't ready to hear. By 7, she'd given up pretending to be productive. She opened a bottle of Sancerre, poured herself a generous glass, and curled up on their dove-grey sofa with a book she couldn't focus on. By 9, she'd finished half the bottle and was seriously considering ordering takeaway. By 10, she heard James's key in the lock. "Hey." He appeared in the living room, loosening his tie. His hair was slightly mussed, his cheeks flushed. "Sorry I'm so late. That dinner ran forever." "How did the presentation go?" Olivia closed her book, studying him. "Brilliant. They loved it. Marcus thinks we've got it in the bag." He kicked off his shoes, unbuttoned his collar. "I'm exhausted. Think I'll take a quick shower and crash. There's pasta in the fridge if you're hungry." "Already ate, but thanks." He was already walking toward the bedroom, pulling out his phone. "Don't wait up." And just like that, another day in their perfect life concluded. Another evening of existing in parallel rather than together. Another night of Olivia, wondering when exactly she'd become invisible in her own marriage. She finished her wine, rinsed the glass, and followed James to bed an hour later. He was already asleep, or pretending to be, his back turned toward her side of the mattress. Olivia lay in the darkness, listening to his breathing, and tried to remember the last time they'd actually talked about something that mattered. The last time he'd asked about her day, her thoughts, her dreams, beyond maintaining their picture-perfect existence. She couldn't. The next morning would bring the beginning of the end. But in that moment, Olivia Hartford was still clinging to the fiction that everything was fine, that marriages went through rough patches, that love could survive on autopilot. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, her entire world would shatter like that champagne flute on marble floors, and she'd be forced to confront a betrayal so devastating it would either destroy her or set her free. The deception unraveled with a forgotten phone. It was Tuesday morning, unremarkable in every way. James had rushed out for an early meeting, kissing Olivia's cheek with the same distracted affection he'd shown for months. She was still in her robe, nursing her first coffee, when she heard the buzzing from the bedroom. His personal phone, not the work one he always carried, sat on his nightstand, vibrating insistently. Olivia normally wouldn't have looked. Privacy was sacred in their marriage, or so she'd believed, but something about the persistence of that buzzing, about the fact that James had left without it, made her feet carry her toward the sound. The screen lit up with a text preview. "Last night was incredible. I can still feel your hands on me. When can I see you again? R.R. Rebecca." The phone slipped from Olivia's fingers onto the bed as if it had burned her. Her vision tunneled, the luxury bedroom shrinking to just that glowing screen, and those words that rewrote her entire reality. Last night. Last night, when he'd claimed to be at dinner with Marcus. "I can still feel your hands on me. Hands that belonged to Olivia. Hands that had promised forever in a church in Oxfordshire 5 years ago." She picked up the phone with trembling fingers. No password. He'd never needed one because she'd never looked. The messages loaded, and Olivia's world collapsed in real time. Weeks of texts, months maybe, intimate details that made her stomach heave, inside jokes, plans made in hotels she and James had visited for their anniversary, photos that no wife should ever see of her husband with someone else. And throughout it all, mentions of her. Olivia doesn't suspect a thing. She's so focused on being the perfect housewife. "I almost feel bad, but you make me feel alive in ways she never has." The bathroom floor was cold against her knees as Olivia vomited up her coffee and whatever remained of her innocence. She stayed there for what might have been minutes or hours, her body shaking with a rage and grief so profound it felt like dying. How long? How long had they been laughing at her? How many dinner parties had she hosted where they'd exchanged secret glances across her carefully set table? How many times had Rebecca sat in this very apartment, drinking Olivia's tea, offering sympathy while carrying on an affair with her husband? The betrayal wasn't just sexual. It was the corruption of everything Olivia had believed about her life. Every memory was now suspect, every kindness from Rebecca a lie. Every "I love you" from James, a manipulation. She pulled herself up, caught sight of her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face was blotchy, mascara-stained, her honey-blonde hair tangled. She looked like a stranger, or maybe she was finally seeing herself clearly for the first time. A woman who'd been so busy being perfect that she'd failed to notice she was living in a house of cards. Olivia's phone rang. James. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message with a detached calm that frightened her. "Hey babe, realized I left my personal phone. Don't worry about it, I'll grab it tonight. Love you." Love you. The words meant nothing, had probably meant nothing for a very long time. She should have screamed, should have called him immediately, destroyed him with her knowledge, but Olivia's mind was working with a cold precision that surprised her. If she confronted him now, over the phone, he'd have time to prepare his lies. He'd call Rebecca, coordinate their stories. They'd gaslight her, make her doubt what she'd seen. No, she'd wait. She'd let him come home tonight, expecting his perfect, unsuspecting wife, and then she'd watch his world implode just as hers had. The day stretched endlessly. Olivia moved through it like a ghost, her body performing familiar tasks while her mind spun in circles of rage and planning. She showered. Dressed in a cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, armor disguised as casual elegance, applied makeup to hide the evidence of her tears. By afternoon, a dangerous idea had taken root. Rebecca had texted again, "Missing you already. Tonight?" Olivia, using James's phone, typed a response. "Come to the apartment at 7. Olivia will be at her mother's. We'll have the place to ourselves." She sent it before she could second-guess herself. Rebecca's reply came immediately. "Perfect. I'll bring that champagne you love. Can't wait to have you all to myself." 6. Olivia set the phone down carefully, her hands steady despite the fury coursing through her veins. She wouldn't go to her mother's. She'd be here, in her own home, and she'd finally see the truth in its entirety. She spent the afternoon preparing, not for them, for herself. She packed a bag with essentials, documents, her grandmother's jewelry that James had never liked, her passport, credit cards in her own name. She moved with the efficiency of someone planning an evacuation, because that's exactly what this was. By 6:30, she'd positioned herself in James's study, the door cracked just enough to see the entrance hallway. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her mind was ice. At 7:03, Rebecca's key turned in the lock. Of course she had a key. Olivia watched her best friend enter the penthouse she'd helped Olivia decorate, carrying a bottle of Bollinger and wearing a dress that probably cost more than Olivia's wedding gown. Rebecca moved with the confidence of someone who belonged, dropping her coat on the chair Olivia's grandmother had left her, calling out, "James, I'm here, darling." James emerged from the bedroom at 7:15, dressed in the shirt Olivia had ironed that morning, freshly showered, smelling of the cologne she'd bought him. What followed was worse than Olivia could have imagined. Not just sex, though there was that, urgent and passionate in a way James had never been with her anymore, but the conversation afterward, as they lay tangled in sheets Olivia had changed that morning, drinking champagne from glasses she'd received as wedding gifts. "When are you going to tell her?" Rebecca asked, trailing her fingers down James's chest. "Soon, I promise. I just need to time it right." James's voice was gentle in a way Olivia hadn't heard in years. "The business is at a critical point, and you know how Olivia is, she'll make it complicated. Cry, beg, probably threaten to tell my clients." "She's so needy." Rebecca laughed. "I don't know how you've stood it this long. The way she looks at you like you're her entire world. It's pathetic." She was convenient, pretty enough, good hostess, didn't ask questions. James kissed Rebecca's shoulder. "But you're right, I've outgrown her. She's stuck in this fantasy of what marriage should be, and I need someone who understands ambition, someone like you." "I love you," Rebecca's voice was soft, genuine. "I have for years. Even when you married her, I knew we'd end up together eventually." "Even when you introduced us?" James sounded amused. "Especially then. I thought she'd be a temporary distraction. Didn't realize you'd actually marry the poor thing." Their laughter echoed through the apartment, and something in Olivia died and was reborn simultaneously. She'd heard enough. More than enough. With hands that had stopped shaking, Olivia picked up her bag, walked silently to the front door, and let herself out of her own home. She didn't slam the door, didn't announce her presence. She simply left, as quietly as she'd been erased from her own marriage. Out on the street, the November air bit through her coat. Taxis rushed past, people hurried home from work. London carried on its endless rhythm. The city suddenly felt both foreign and full of possibility. Olivia pulled out her phone, blocked both James and Rebecca's numbers, and started walking. She had no destination, no plan beyond putting distance between herself and the wreckage of her old life. 3 blocks away, in a light drizzle that matched her internal storm, she finally let herself cry. Not delicate tears, but sobs that shook her entire body. 5 years of suppressed feelings erupting in a sidewalk breakdown that made pedestrians give her wide berth. A sleek black car pulled up beside her. The back window rolled down, revealing a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Get in, darling. You look like you could use a friend." The voice was cultured, kind, and completely unfamiliar. Olivia should have said no, should have been more careful. But in that moment, she was so utterly destroyed that kindness from a stranger felt safer than anything in her known world. She got in the car. The woman handed her a tissue, didn't ask questions, just instructed the driver, a tall man in a dark suit she couldn't see clearly, to head to the Dorchester. "I'm Eleanor Ashford," the woman said, "and you're going to be fine." "I promise you that." Olivia wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that anything could ever be fine again. But as London blurred past the window, all she could think was that she'd lost everything. Her husband, her best friend, her home, her identity. She had no idea that losing everything would be the best thing that ever happened to her, or that the silent driver in the front seat would change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The Dorchester suite was obscenely opulent, all silk wallpaper and antique furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Hyde Park. Eleanor Ashford had installed Olivia there with maternal efficiency, ordering room service, providing clean clothes from somewhere Olivia was too exhausted to question, and finally, mercifully, leaving her alone with a promise to return in the morning. Olivia stood under a shower hot enough to scold, trying to wash away the feeling of betrayal that clung to her skin like oil. She stayed there until the water ran lukewarm, until her fingers pruned, until she'd cried every tear her body could produce. The next 3 days passed in a blur of luxury hotel isolation. Eleanor appeared each morning with coffee and surprising wisdom, never pushing, just present. She was a widow, she'd explained, whose late husband had built a tech empire. She had resources, time, and a particular intolerance for men who destroyed good women. "I saw you on that street corner," Eleanor said on the 3rd day, as they sat in the suite's sitting room, "and I saw myself 30 years ago. Different circumstances, same devastation. So I'm going to tell you what I wish someone had told me. This pain is temporary, but what you do next is permanent." "I don't know what to do next," Olivia admitted, her voice raw. "Everything I was, everything I built, it was all fake." "No, what he was fake. You were real. Your love was real. Your effort was real." Eleanor leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Don't let his betrayal steal your truth." James had called from the hotel phone 17 times, left voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to panicked. Rebecca had called 12 times. Olivia had listened to none of them. On the 4th day, she finally powered on her phone. 53 messages from James, 32 from Rebecca, 17 from mutual friends who'd clearly heard something, and 1 from her lawyer, because in a moment of clarity on day 2, she'd called her university roommate, who'd become a family law attorney, and set the divorce in motion. Papers will be served tomorrow. His accounts are frozen pending asset division. Don't respond to any communication from him. Sarah Olivia felt nothing reading it. The woman who would have begged him to stay, who would have tried couples therapy, who would have blamed herself, that woman had died on a cold sidewalk in Kensington 4 days ago. "I need to get my things from the apartment," she told Eleanor. "Personal items, photos, my grandmother's tea service. I'll send someone. No, I need to do it. I need to see it one last time and know I'm walking away by choice." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you won't go alone. Thomas will drive you." Thomas, the driver, who'd been a silent presence throughout Olivia's stay, always there but never intrusive, somehow managing to be both invisible and oddly comforting. That afternoon, as Olivia prepared to return to the apartment, she finally looked at James's messages. The first ones were confused. "Where are you? Your mother says you're not there. I'm worried." Then defensive. "Whatever you think you know, there's an explanation. Just come home so we can talk." Then aggressive. "You're being ridiculous. I've left work early and you're not here. This is childish, Olivia." Then desperate, the lawyer called. "Please, please don't do this. I love you. It was a mistake. Rebecca meant nothing. The last one sent an hour ago. You're going to regret this. I made you. Without me, you're nothing, nobody." Olivia read that last message 3 times, and something hardened in her chest. Not hurt, she was past hurt. This was rage, cold and crystalline, that gave her a clarity she'd never experienced. She typed one response: "I'm coming for my things at 4 p.m. Don't be there." Then she blocked his number permanently. Thomas was waiting in the lobby, tall and impeccably dressed in a dark suit. Olivia had barely looked at him during the past few days, but now she took him in properly. He was perhaps 40, with dark hair greying at the temples, strong features, and unusual grey eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing nothing. "Mrs. Hartford," he greeted her with a slight nod, his voice deep and unexpectedly cultured. "The car is ready." They drove through London in silence. Olivia watched the city pass, streets she knew by heart, coffee shops where she and Rebecca had spent countless hours, the gallery where she'd met James. All of it now recontextualized by betrayal. "How long have you worked for Mrs. Ashford?" she asked suddenly. "Several years." Thomas's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "She's a remarkable woman." "She is. I don't even know why she helped me." "Mrs. Ashford believes in helping women find their strength." There was something in his tone, respect, admiration, perhaps personal experience. "She has a gift for seeing who people truly are beneath their circumstances." "And what does she see in me?" Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Someone who hasn't yet realized her own power." The words settled into Olivia's chest like stones, weighty and grounding. At the apartment building, the doorman's expression flickered with discomfort. "Mrs. Hartford, we've missed seeing you." "Thank you, Gerald." She swept past him toward the private lift, Thomas following at a respectful distance. The penthouse was exactly as she'd left it, except for the empty champagne bottle still on the nightstand and the unmade bed that broadcast James's betrayal in rumpled sheets. Olivia stood in the doorway of her bedroom and felt absolutely nothing. She moved through the space methodically, packing boxes Thomas had brought from the car, her grandmother's china, photo albums from her childhood, books James had never read, the few pieces of jewelry that had been hers before the marriage. "Is Mr. Hartford expected?" Thomas asked, positioning himself near the door with the alertness of someone trained for confrontation. "I told him not to be here." Olivia wrapped her grandmother's teapot in bubble wrap. But James has never been good at respecting boundaries. As if summoned by her words, the door burst open. James stood there, dishevelled in a way she'd never seen him. 3-day stubble, wrinkled shirt, hair uncombed. His blue eyes were wild, desperate. "Olivia, thank God." He moved toward her, but Thomas stepped between them with surprising speed. "Mr. Hartford, Mrs. Hartford has requested that you not be present. Who the hell are you?" James tried to push past him, but Thomas didn't budge. For the first time, Olivia noticed Thomas was substantially taller and broader than her husband. "I'm someone ensuring Mrs. Hartford's wishes are respected." "This is my home." James's voice rose. "Olivia, tell this thug to get out of our apartment." "It's not our apartment anymore." Olivia's voice was steady, cold. "And Thomas stays. You can leave, or I can call the police and have you removed." James stared at her, as if she'd become a stranger. Perhaps she had. "You can't do this. You can't just throw away 5 years because of one mistake." "One mistake," Olivia laughed, a sound without humor. "I read the messages, James. Months, possibly years, in our bed, in hotels we visited together. You discussed leaving me while making love to my best friend?" His face paled. You were here that night. I saw everything, heard everything." She carefully placed her grandmother's teacup in a box. "I know what you really think of me. Convenient, needy, pathetic." "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. That's the first honest thing you've said." Olivia finally looked at him directly. "Do you want to know the saddest part? I would have forgiven you. A month ago, even a week ago, if you'd come to me with the truth, I would have tried to save this marriage. I loved you that much. Then why? Because you didn't just betray me. You erased me. You took the woman I was, someone who had dreams, ambitions, a whole identity, and you slowly, systematically reduced me to nothing but a reflection of your needs. And I let you live. Don't call me that. Only people who actually see me get to call me that." She sealed the box, then straightened to her full height. "The divorce papers are filed. My lawyer will be in touch about asset division. Don't contact me again. You'll regret this." James's desperation curdled into ugliness. "Without me, you're nothing. No career, no purpose, no identity. You're going to end up alone and broken." "Maybe." Olivia picked up the box, walked past him toward the door where Thomas waited. "But I'd rather be alone and broken than whole and hollow. I'd rather start from nothing than continue as nobody." At the threshold of her former home, she paused, looked back one last time at the life she was leaving. "I hope she was worth it, James. I hope Rebecca gives you everything you deserve." Outside, in the lift descending from her old life, Olivia felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, but breaking free. Tears streamed down her face, but they felt different now. Not the helpless tears of a victim, but the fierce tears of someone choosing herself for the first time in years. Thomas loaded her boxes into the car, handed her a handkerchief without comment, and drove her back to the Dorchester in silence that felt protective rather than uncomfortable. "He was wrong," Thomas said finally, as they pulled up to the hotel. "What he said about you being nothing." Olivia wiped her eyes, met his gaze in the mirror. "How would you know? Because nothing doesn't fight back, nothing doesn't walk away, nothing doesn't choose its own dignity." He got out, opened her door. "You did all three." Later that night, alone in her suite, Olivia stood at the window overlooking Hyde Park and made a decision. She wouldn't just survive this, she wouldn't just recover. She would rebuild herself into someone so completely whole, so entirely her own, that James's betrayal would become nothing but a footnote in a story about her strength. She had no idea how, no idea where to start. But for the first time in years, Possibly her entire adult life, Olivia Hartford belonged to no one but herself. And that, she was beginning to realize, was the most terrifying and liberating feeling in the world. 6 weeks later, Olivia barely recognized her own life. The divorce was proceeding with brutal efficiency. James, it turned out, had significantly less leverage than he'd believed. The prenup his family's lawyer had insisted on, designed to protect the Hartford fortune, was now protecting Olivia's substantial settlement. Their apartment was sold, assets divided, and every legal tie binding her to James Hartford was being systematically severed. Eleanor Ashford had become something between a mentor and a fairy godmother. She'd offered Olivia a position managing her private art collection, a role that perfectly aligned with Olivia's abandoned degree and dormant passion. More than that, Eleanor had given her a flat in Chelsea, modest by Olivia's former standards, but entirely hers, filled with light and possibility. "You have an eye," Eleanor had said during Olivia's second week as they stood in her Mayfair townhouse gallery. "More than that, you have the kind of aesthetic intelligence that can't be taught. It's been buried, but it's not dead." Olivia had thrown herself into the work with an intensity that surprised everyone, especially herself. She spent her days cataloguing Eleanor's remarkable collection, researching provenance, coordinating with auction houses and galleries. She spent her evenings reading art journals she'd neglected for years, taking courses online, slowly reclaiming the version of herself that had existed before James. The transformation wasn't just professional. She cut her hair, a sharp bob that framed her face with confidence she was learning to inhabit. She donated every piece of clothing from her marriage, every item chosen to be James's perfect wife, and rebuilt a wardrobe that reflected who she was becoming. She'd started running along the Thames each morning, pushing her body until the physical pain drowned out the emotional echoes. And through it all, there was Thomas. Thomas, who drove her to viewings and auctions with quiet reliability. Thomas, who somehow anticipated her needs before she voiced them. Thomas, who'd begun recommending books and sharing observations about art that revealed a depth of knowledge unexpected in a driver. "You studied art history," Olivia said one afternoon, as they drove back from a gallery in Shoreditch. It wasn't a question. His eyes met hers in the mirror, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Among other things, that's deliberately mysterious. Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm simply a driver who reads extensively." But he wasn't simply a driver, and Olivia had begun to suspect Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing by assigning Thomas to her. There was something about him, an understated elegance, a quality of attention, a way of moving through the world that suggested privilege carefully concealed rather than aspiration carefully displayed. His suits were subtly exquisite. His watch was a vintage Patek Philippe he never drew attention to. He spoke fluent French, Italian, and what sounded like Russian when he took calls he thought she couldn't hear. "Who are you, really?" she asked one evening, emboldened by the glass of wine she'd had at a gallery opening. Thomas was helping her out of the car outside her Chelsea flat. His hand was steady under her elbow, warm through her coat. "I'm Thomas." He said it simply, meeting her gaze with those grey eyes that always seemed to see too much. "Does anything else matter? Most people would say yes. Most people would want to impress me with their credentials, their background, their importance. Then it's fortunate I'm not most people." He smiled, and Olivia's breath caught because she'd never seen him fully smile before. It transformed his serious face, revealed laugh lines around his eyes, made him look younger and somehow more real. "Good night, Olivia. You did beautifully tonight." It was the first time he'd called her by her first name. She lay awake that night, thinking about that smile, about the way he'd said her name, about how comfortable she'd become with his presence, how she looked forward to their drives, their conversations, the way he challenged her intellectually without ever making her feel diminished. "You're glowing," Eleanor observed the next morning over coffee in her study. "That gallery opening must have gone well." "It was fine. Some interesting pieces, nothing extraordinary." Olivia was studying a painting catalogue, determinedly not thinking about Thomas. Eleanor's tone suggested she wasn't fooled. "Thomas mentioned you seem to enjoy yourself." "Thomas talks to you about me?" "Thomas is very protective of people he respects." Eleanor set down her teacup with deliberate care. "Darling, I'm going to be direct, because subtlety has never been my strong suit. Thomas isn't simply my driver." "I'd gathered that." "His family owns the Carlyle Group, hotels primarily, but also significant real estate holdings throughout Europe. He's been running the business since his father's death 3 years ago." Olivia stared at her, the catalogue forgotten. "Then why is he driving my car?" Eleanor's eyes sparkled with something like mischief. "Because Thomas is a brilliant businessman, but a terrible judge of character in his personal life. His ex-wife married him for money, stripped him in a vicious divorce, and left him convinced that every woman he meets is calculating his net worth. So he pretends to be your employee." "He is my employee, technically. I hold a board position in the Carlyle Group, but yes, when he needs to move through the world, without the complication of his wealth, he drives, observes, learns who people really are when they think he's just Thomas the driver." Olivia felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Does he think I'm calculating?" "No, darling, that's precisely the point." Eleanor reached across to touch Olivia's hand. "He's been himself with you. Not the heir, not the businessman, not the trophy to be won. Just Thomas. And you've been yourself, not trying to impress him, not treating him as a means to anything. That's extraordinarily rare in our world." "Our world?" Olivia laughed shakily. "I'm hardly in your world. I'm a woman who lost everything. You're a woman who chose everything." Eleanor's voice was firm. "You chose dignity over comfort, integrity over security, yourself over the easy lie. That takes more courage than most people possess, and it's exactly the kind of strength Thomas has been searching for without knowing it." Now, that evening, Thomas appeared at her flat unexpectedly, no car, dressed in jeans and a cashmere sweater that made him look approachable in a way his driver's uniform never had. "I owe you an explanation," he said when Olivia opened the door. "Eleanor told me." "Ah." He looked almost disappointed. "I wanted to tell you myself. I was going to tonight. Take you to dinner, be honest about who I am, hope you wouldn't be too angry about the deception." "Are you still taking me to dinner?" His smile returned, that transformative expression that made her forget to breathe. "If you'll have me. Not as your driver. As Thomas Carlyle, who's been falling for a woman too stubborn to realize how extraordinary she is." They went to a small Italian restaurant in Chelsea. No pretense, no luxury performance. They talked for 4 hours, sharing stories about their respective betrayals, his ex-wife's calculated cruelty, Olivia's devastation. But more than the pain, they shared the rebuilding, their discoveries about who they were outside of others' definitions. "I thought I'd lost everything when Sarah left," Thomas admitted over tiramisu they were sharing. "She took half my company, my confidence, my ability to trust. I became paranoid, suspicious, certain that everyone wanted something from me. And then I saw you on that street corner, completely shattered, and Eleanor made me drive us to the Dorchester. I spent 4 days watching you piece yourself back together with a grace I'd never seen. You didn't want anything from anyone. You just wanted to survive. I wanted to disappear. But you didn't. You fought. You rebuilt. You became more yourself rather than less." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Do you know how rare that is? Most people broken by betrayal become bitter or guarded or smaller. You became radiant." And if you're rooting for her like I am, show it by hitting that like button. And if you want to see more mini novellas like this one, subscribe to the channel because there's so much more coming your way. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were different tears than she'd cried 6 weeks ago. These were tears of recognition, of being truly seen for the first time in years. "I'm not healed," she whispered. "I'm still angry, still hurt, still figuring out who I am." "I know. I'm not healed either." Thomas's thumb traced circles on her palm. "But maybe we could figure it out together. No expectations, no pressure, just two people who've survived the worst and are ready for something better." Outside the restaurant, under London's winter stars, Thomas kissed her. Gentle, tentative, nothing like James's possessive claims or Rebecca's betrayal. This was a question, an invitation, a promise of patience. And Olivia, for the first time since her world shattered, kissed him back, not because she needed him, not because he could save her or complete her or fix the broken parts, but because she wanted him, because she was whole enough to choose connection without losing herself, because she'd learned the difference between love that diminishes and love that illuminates. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Thomas courted her properly. Dinners and gallery visits, long walks through Regent's Park, tickets to the ballet where they held hands in the dark. He introduced her to his life slowly, letting her meet his sister first, then his colleagues, always making clear that she was someone he valued, someone he respected, never just an ornament on his arm. In return, Olivia let him see her unfiltered. The mornings she woke, panicked from dreams of James. The moments she still doubted her own worth. The days she felt inadequate despite Eleanor's constant reassurance. "You're allowed to be a work in progress," Thomas said one Sunday morning as they had breakfast in her flat. Olivia had burned the eggs, spilled coffee, and nearly cried from frustration. "You don't have to be perfect for me to want you. Everyone wants perfect. James wanted perfect. I want real." He pulled her into his arms, and Olivia let herself lean into his strength without fearing she'd lose her own. "I want the woman who tells me when I'm being pretentious about wine, who challenges my opinions on modern art, who runs 5 miles at dawn and comes home sweaty and triumphant. I want exactly who you are." 3 months after her world had shattered, Olivia stood in Eleanor's gallery, preparing for her first major exhibition as assistant curator. She wore a dress she'd chosen herself, emerald silk that made her feel powerful and feminine and entirely herself. Thomas arrived early, looking devastating in a dark suit, his eyes finding her immediately across the room. "Nervous?" he asked, handing her champagne. "Terrified." She laughed, but it was the laugh of someone excited rather than afraid. "What if I've forgotten everything? What if I'm not actually good at this? You're brilliant at this. But even if you weren't, you'd still be enough." He kissed her forehead. "You've already survived the thing you feared most. Losing everything. Everything after that is just living." The exhibition was a triumph. Critics praised the curation. Collectors bought pieces. Eleanor beamed with maternal pride, but the real victory was internal. Olivia standing in a room full of people, completely herself, no longer performing perfection, but embodying authenticity. And when she looked across the gallery and caught Thomas watching her with undisguised admiration, Olivia realized something profound. She hadn't needed him to save her. She'd saved herself, but choosing to love him, to let him love her from a place of wholeness rather than brokenness, that was the real power move. That night, as they drove through London in Thomas's actual car, a vintage Aston Martin he'd finally revealed, Olivia's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "James. Saw your name in the Evening Standard. Art curator now? Guess you didn't need me after all. Rebecca and I are engaged. Hope you're happy." Olivia read it once, felt absolutely nothing, and deleted it without responding. "Everything all right?" Thomas glanced at her. "Everything's perfect." And she meant it. Not because her life was perfect, it wasn't, but because for the first time in years, possibly ever, Olivia Hartford was choosing her own story, writing her own ending. And this ending, she was beginning to realize, was actually a beginning. 1 year later, Olivia stood in the same spot where her old life had ended, outside the building that had housed her penthouse prison. But everything else was different. She wasn't hiding, wasn't running. She was here for a gallery opening in the ground floor space. Her gallery, the one Eleanor had invested in and Olivia now managed, representing emerging artists who needed someone to believe in them the way Eleanor had believed in her. "Ready?" Thomas stood beside her, his hand finding hers naturally, no longer her driver, no longer hiding who he was. Just Thomas, her partner, her equal, her choice. More than ready. The past year had been transformative in ways Olivia couldn't have imagined during those dark November days. The divorce had finalized quickly once James realized fighting would only expose more of his duplicity. He'd married Rebecca in a small ceremony in the Cotswolds, and according to mutual friends, they were already attending couples therapy. Olivia felt nothing about that, but vague pity. She'd thrown herself into building something entirely her own. The gallery, Daria House, named after her grandmother, had opened 6 months ago to critical acclaim. She represented artists who'd been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed by the traditional art establishment. Women returning to careers after raising children, self-taught painters from immigrant communities, young artists who couldn't afford Central St. Martin's but had raw, undeniable talent. "You're giving people what you needed," Thomas had observed once. "Someone who sees them." He'd proposed on a Tuesday evening, nothing elaborate. They'd been cooking dinner in her flat, his flat now too, since he'd moved in 3 months prior, and he'd simply said, "Marry me." No ring, no bended knee. No performance, just marry me. Not because you need me or I need you, but because I want to build a life with the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Olivia had cried, laughed and said, "Yes, but I'm keeping my own name. I wouldn't have it any other way." They'd married quietly at Chelsea Town Hall, Eleanor and Thomas's sister as witnesses, then had dinner at the Italian restaurant where he'd first kissed her. No white dress, no pretense, no performance of perfect matrimony. Just two people who'd survived betrayal, choosing partnership from a place of strength. The wedding was everything her first one hadn't been. Honest, joyful, completely theirs. Tonight's gallery opening was for an artist named Maya, 26, first-generation British-Pakistani, whose paintings combined traditional miniature techniques with contemporary social commentary. Olivia had discovered her work at a community centre in Tower Hamlets, had immediately seen the genius others had missed. The space filled quickly with collectors, critics, art enthusiasts. Olivia moved through the crowd with confidence she'd cultivated over 12 months of choosing herself every single day. She wore a dress she loved, hair styled the way she preferred, speaking with authority she'd earned rather than performed. "You're glowing," Eleanor said, appearing at her elbow with champagne. "Marriage suits you, or rather the right marriage suits you. The right partnership suits me." Olivia corrected gently. "I learned the difference." "As did I, eventually." Eleanor raised her glass. "To women who refuse to settle, to those who choose themselves first and love second, to the beautiful, terrifying freedom of autonomy." They clinked glasses, and Olivia felt the weight of Eleanor's words. This woman had saved her life by helping her save herself, had given her not just opportunity but belief that she deserved opportunity. Across the gallery, Thomas was deep in conversation with Maya, clearly asking thoughtful questions about her process. He caught Olivia's eye, winked, and she felt that familiar warmth, Not desperate need, not insecure attachment, but the solid comfort of being loved by someone who genuinely liked who she was. "Olivia?" A tentative voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find a woman in her early 40s, elegantly dressed, holding a catalogue. "I'm sorry to interrupt, I had to tell you. I read about you in the Guardian profile last month, about your divorce, your rebuilding, this gallery. I'm in the middle of leaving my husband, and some days I think I'm crazy to walk away from financial security. But reading your story made me feel less alone." Olivia felt her throat tighten. "You're not crazy. You're brave. I keep wondering if I'm making a mistake. The only mistake is staying somewhere you've disappeared." Olivia took the woman's hand. "I promise you, whatever you're walking toward will be better than what you're leaving, even if it's harder, even if it's scarier, because you'll be doing it as yourself." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You have no idea what that means." But Olivia did know. She knew exactly what it meant to need permission to choose yourself, to hear someone say that your instinct to save yourself was valid. After the woman left, Olivia stood quietly watching her gallery buzz with energy. This space filled with art that challenged and inspired. These people gathered to celebrate creativity and courage. This life built entirely on her own terms. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown international number. "Congratulations on the gallery opening. Saw it mentioned in Art News. I always knew you had potential. We should talk." Olivia stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to Thomas. "Do you want to respond?" His voice was neutral, giving her space to feel whatever she needed. "No. He had 5 years of my words. He doesn't get one more." She blocked the number without a second thought. "He'll never understand what he lost," Thomas said quietly. "No, but I understand what I found." Olivia leaned into him, feeling his solid presence. "I found myself. Everything else, you, the gallery, this life, it's all built on that foundation. That's the difference. With James, I built myself around him. With you, I built myself first, and then invited you in. Best invitation I ever received." The evening wound down beautifully. Maya sold 4 paintings, received commissions for 3 more, and cried in Olivia's office about dreams she'd thought were impossible. Eleanor held court with collectors, already planning the gallery's next exhibition. Thomas helped pack up, comfortable in this world Olivia had created, supporting without overshadowing. Late that night, in their flat overlooking the Thames, Olivia stood at the window watching London's lights reflect on dark water. Thomas emerged from the shower, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How a year ago I thought my life was over. How I stood on a street corner in Kensington, completely shattered, certain I'd never be whole again." She turned in his arms. "How wrong I was. You were never broken. You were breaking free. I know that now, but I had to lose everything to learn it, had to be stripped down to nothing to discover I was actually everything I needed. Do you regret any of it? Even James, even the pain?" Olivia considered the question seriously. "No, because that pain taught me what I was capable of surviving. It taught me the difference between love that diminishes and love that honors. It taught me that I'm enough, entirely on my own, and everything else is a choice, not a necessity. Including me, especially you." She kissed him softly. "I don't need you to complete me or save me or define me. I choose you because you enhance who I already am, because you celebrate my strength rather than fearing it, because you understand that loving me means giving me space to keep growing." "Always," Thomas promised. "I fell in love with who you are, not who I could make you. The day I stop celebrating your evolution is the day I stop deserving you." They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who'd survived betrayal separately and chosen partnership carefully. Outside, London carried on its endless rhythm. Millions of lives intersecting, millions of stories unfolding. Somewhere in the city, James and Rebecca were living their carefully constructed life, perhaps discovering that relationships built on betrayal carry their own particular poison. Olivia didn't care. They were characters in a story she'd finished writing. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through gauze curtains and Thomas already up, making coffee the way she liked it. Her phone showed messages from artists requesting gallery representation. Her calendar was full of viewings, meetings, opportunities she created through her own effort. She dressed for a breakfast meeting with a collector interested in funding a scholarship for young artists, another project Eleanor had inspired. In the mirror, Olivia saw a woman she barely recognized from a year ago, but knew intimately now. Confident, purposeful, unapologetically herself. The woman who'd been erased by James Hartford was gone. In her place stood Olivia, no longer defined by her last name, her relationship status, or anyone else's perception. Just Olivia, who'd chosen to become extraordinary by refusing to accept ordinary. She'd learned the hardest lesson, that you can't lose what's truly yours. James had taken the life she'd built around him, but he couldn't take her essential self. That had always been hers, waiting to be reclaimed. "Ready to change the world today?" Thomas asked, handing her coffee. "I'm ready to change my corner of it," Olivia replied. "That's enough." And it was, more than enough, because she'd learned that success wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about the daily choice to honor yourself, to build rather than perform, to love from wholeness rather than need. She'd learned that betrayal could be a beginning rather than an ending. She'd learned that losing everything was sometimes the price of finding yourself, and she'd learned, finally, absolutely, that the most important love story she'd ever write was the one with herself. Every other love could only be a beautiful addition to a life already complete. As Olivia left the flat, stepping into a London morning full of possibility, she thought of that woman on the street corner a year ago, the one who'd thought her life was over. She wished she could tell her, "This pain is temporary, but who you become because of it is permanent. The strength you don't know you have is about to remake your entire world. Hold on. The woman you're becoming is extraordinary." But that woman was gone now, transformed through fire into someone who couldn't be destroyed by anyone else's choices ever again. Olivia Hartford had learned to save herself. Everything else was just the beautiful aftermath.